Michael slammed divorce papers onto the kitchen counter and told his loyal wife she was too ordinary, too cheap, and too embarrassing for the successful life he deserved. He had already spent $12,000 on a bracelet for his glamorous mistress, Tiffany, and planned to introduce her at the most exclusive charity gala in New York. Celine did not beg him to stay. She simply made one phone call and said, "Tell my father I am coming home, and I am finally ready to wear the crown." 3 days later, Michael entered the gala hoping to meet billionaire Alexander Sterling. Never realizing the quiet woman he had thrown away was Sterling's only daughter and the true owner of everything he wanted. The lesson is simple. Never mistake humility for weakness or loyalty for lack of value. What would you have done in Selena's position? Like, comment, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of betrayal, karma, and justice. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful values and powerful life lessons.
She glided into the ballroom, diamond choker catching the light. Tiffany Baines gripped my husband's arm like a trophy. She wore that heavy logo-stamped bag like armor, clearly convinced she was the future Mrs. Vance. Then she locked eyes with me and laughed. A sharp mocking sound. She saw a nobody, a penny pincher who had no place breathing her air. The irony was staggering. She was standing in a luxury hotel my own father built. That vintage champagne she was swilling, straight from my family's private estate. Even the platinum card she flashed to humiliate me, it carried a limit I personally authorized. Wait for the reveal. She was busy bragging to the woman who owned the whole building. Celine Vance sat at her kitchen island. The house was modest, a 3-bedroom suburban build. A chipped corner on the granite caught her eye, a tiny defect that earned them a discount years ago. She traced the rough edge, a sad smile on her lips from the outside. She was just another woman living an unremarkable life, no power, no luxury. Her world was coupons, a 5-year-old Honda, and freelance design work. 7:30 p.m. Michael was late again, grinding away for the Anderson account. He had texted a curt excuse hours ago. Since then, total silence. She stood to cover the lasagna. She still held on to a fading hope that the man she married was still in there somewhere. Years ago, Michael Vance had been a hungry student, holes in his shoes, fire in his belly. He was kind then, grounded. He never cared about money because he never had any. That was why she fell for him. It was also why she hid her true background. To him, she was just Celine Miller, a simple orphan fighting to get by. In truth, she was Celine Sterling, sole heir to the Sterling Global conglomerate, shipping lines, luxury hotels, half of Manhattan's prime real estate. Her father was Alexander Sterling, a billionaire whose net worth lived in the Forbes top 10. She was royalty, raised in penthouses and boardrooms, now waiting in a suburban kitchen for a husband who was drifting away. She kept her identity secret to find love that was pure, not for the Sterling billions, but for her. But lately, Michael was slipping through her fingers like sand. The front door groaned open, a heavy, uncharacteristic thud. The house didn't feel warmer. It felt suffocating, flooded with the cloying, clashing scent of Baccarat Rouge 540, a heavy, expensive, unmistakable fragrance. "Not hers, you are finally home," she said, wiping flour from her hands. "I made lasagna." Michael didn't even look at her. He tossed his keys onto the granite, keys to the flashy BMW he leased despite her advice. "I am not hungry," he muttered. "Heading for the stairs. We need to talk." Celine said, "You have been so distant." The credit card bill came today. $12,000 charge at Cartier. She watched his back. "I have to assume that is a mistake." Michael froze. His shoulders stiffened. He turned slowly, but there was no apology in his eyes. Only a sneering mask of pure contempt. Cold, calculated. "It was not a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to an icy temperature. "Then who is it for?" Celine asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We do not have that kind of money. It is for someone who appreciates the finer things." Michael snapped. "Someone who does not make me feel guilty for wanting to live like a success. I am an architect, yet I come home to this suffocating, pathetic, tiny middle-class mediocrity. You act like we are destitute." Celine countered, her voice steady despite the crushing shock. "Michael, just tell me who she is." Michael laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Her name is Tiffany, unlike you. She knows how to navigate the social world I belong in. She is a consultant at the firm. She has genuine class, something you wouldn't understand. Class, Celine raised a skeptical eyebrow. Sleeping with a married man is your definition of class. We are done, Michael. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and slammed it on the granite. I have outgrown you. I need a partner who shines. Not a dull shadow. I am filing for divorce. I have paid the mortgage for 2 years. Get out by Friday. Celine stared at the divorce papers. A cold, electric sensation washed over her. Not just heartbreak, a clarifying rage. He thought he was paying the mortgage. He had no idea her freelance work had paid off the principal years ago just to lower their rate. You are leaving me for a woman because she spends money you do not have, she asked. I am leaving you because you are embarrassing. Michael spat. Next week is the Sterling Charity Gala, the biggest event of the year. Tiffany got us invites. I cannot walk into a room like that with you in some cheap department store dress. I need to make partner. Tiffany is my ticket to the top. You are just an anchor dragging me down. The irony was suffocating. The Sterling Charity Gala was hosted by her own father, an event she had avoided for 5 years to keep her secret. Get out, Celine whispered, her voice dangerously calm. Michael sneered, turning his back. I am staying at Tiffany S. penthouse. Pack your bags, he marched out, leaving Celine in a kitchen she owned, rejected by a husband she had secretly bankrolled. She picked up her phone. Her hand trembled not from sadness, but from the sharp adrenaline of a sleeping dragon finally waking up. She dialed a number she hadn't touched in 3 years. The Sterling residence who is speaking. The crisp, professional voice of the butler answered on the first ring. Alfred, it is Celine, she said, her tone shifting from the submissive housewife to the cold, authoritative presence she was born to be. Tell my father I am coming home, and tell him I am ready to wear the crown. 3 days had passed since Michael walked out. Celine was back at the sprawling Sterling estate in the Hamptons, a place that made the White House look like a guest cottage. Her reunion with Alexander had been raw, filled with the I told you so sentiments he politely swallowed for his daughter's tears. Those tears had dried. Now, there was only the mission. You want to attend the gala? Alexander Sterling asked, sitting behind his mahogany desk, watching Celine with curiosity. He was a formidable man 60 years old, with silver hair and eyes that could cut through glass. Not just attend, Dad, Celine said, adjusting the silk cuffs of her tailored blouse. I have decided to host it. I want to be officially announced. It is time Celine Sterling came back from the dead. Alexander offered a wolfish, proud grin. That is my girl, he said, but if you are returning to society, you need the wardrobe to match. I am already on it, Celine replied. An hour later, she walked into Maison du Ciel, the most exclusive boutique in the city. You needed a formal appointment just to glance at the window display here. Celine was dressed in simple jeans and a white t-shirt, large sunglasses hiding her face. She wanted to browse before her private fitting later that afternoon. She was studying a midnight blue velvet gown when a shrill, grating voice pierced the elegant silence of the store. Oh, look, Michael, I want something in a vibrant crimson to match the interior of the new Porsche. Celine froze. She peered through a rack of heavy silk scarves. Michael stood there, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was too tight, and hanging off his arm was a woman dipped in liquid gold and diamonds. It was Tiffany Baines. She was stunning in a plastic, manufactured way, with platinum extensions and lips that were far too full. She wore a white bodycon dress and snapped her fingers at a sales assistant. You bring me the platinum collection. Get my fiancé sparkling water, she commanded with a sneer, her voice echoing against the marble floors. Michael looked up, his eyes widening. He spotted Celine near the racks. For a second, he looked genuinely panicked. Then, seeing her simple jeans and t-shirt, his arrogance surged back. He leaned in and whispered something to Tiffany. Tiffany whipped her head around, scanning Celine with unadulterated disgust. They started walking toward her. Well, well, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Michael told me his ex-wife was plain, but he never mentioned she was homeless. Tiffany mocked. Celine stood her ground, her posture regal. Hello. Michael, Tiffany, I assume that is Miss Baines to you. Tiffany scoffed. She lifted her hand, flashing a ring that caught the light, a gaudy, oversized yellow diamond that looked painfully heavy. "Michael just bought this for me," she declared with pride. "It cost more than that sad little car you drive." Tiffany bragged. "What are you doing here? The charity bin is 3 blocks away." "I am shopping," Celine said, perfectly calm, just like you. Tiffany let out a loud, cackling sound that drew the store security. "Shopping, honey. A single scarf here cost $5,000. Do you even have that much without Michael's paycheck?" Michael stepped forward, trying to look authoritative. "Celine, do not embarrass yourself, just leave," Michael commanded. "You do not belong here. This is not some discount store." "I have every right to be here," Celine said, her gaze steady. "No, you absolutely do not," Tiffany snapped. She grabbed a shimmering silver dress off the rack. "See this, a Vautour original. It is $20,000. I am buying it to wear to the Sterling Gala. I bet you have never even smelled a dress like this." Tiffany sneered. She turned to the sales associate, a young woman named Sarah, who looked terrified. "Excuse me, tell this person to leave. She is disturbing the high-end clientele. She obviously cannot afford anything here." Sarah looked at Celine, then back at Tiffany, her expression becoming serious and unreadable as she processed the scene. "Listen, everyone is welcome to browse, but I spend $50,000 a month in this district." Tiffany shrieked, causing other shoppers to gasp. "If you do not kick this peasant out, I will call the owner. My fiancé is a top-tier architect who knows everyone." Michael looked nervous, shifting his weight. "Tiffany, babe, maybe we should just ignore her." "No, I want her out now." Tiffany stepped into Celine's personal space, the smell of her cloying perfume suffocating. "Listen to me, you little mouse. You already lost. Michael is mine. The money is mine. The lifestyle is mine. You are just a pathetic nobody who uses coupons for cat food. Get out before I have security drag you out." Celine felt the anger bubbling, but she forced it down. "Not the right time. Not quite yet. Enjoy the dress, Tiffany," Celine said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low tone. "It looks a bit tight on you." Celine turned and walked out, her head held high behind her. She heard Tiffany screeching at the staff. "Did she just say I am fat? Michael, do something." As Celine stepped onto the sidewalk, she pulled her phone from her purse, her fingers moving with purpose. She dialed her father's personal assistant. "Hello, Miss Sterling," the assistant answered warmly. "Hi, Jessica," Celine said, glancing back through the glass where Tiffany was aggressively waving a credit card. "I need a favor regarding Maison du Ciel. Who owns the building lease?" There was the sound of rapid typing. "That would be Sterling Commercial Properties." "Ma'am." Celine smiled a cold, terrifying smile that did not reach her eyes. "Excellent. Call the manager. Tell them I want the entire Platinum Collection reserved for a private viewing at the estate tomorrow. And specifically, make sure the silver Vautour gown is marked as unavailable." "Consider it done," the assistant replied. Celine hung up. Tiffany thought she had won the battle at the boutique. She had no idea Celine was about to buy the entire battlefield. The morning sun over the Hamptons didn't just shine, it caressed the manicured lawns of the Sterling estate. Inside the master suite, Celine stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She wasn't looking at her reflection. She was looking at a stranger, the woman who had finally reclaimed her power. For 5 years, she had worn the mask of a suburban housewife. She had worn cheap cotton, kept her nails short, and worried about electric bills. She had dimmed her light just to make Michael feel brighter. Standing there now, surrounded by the opulence she was born into, she felt a phantom limb pain, the ache of the love she had finally amputated 3 days ago. "The stylist is ready for you." Miss Sterling Alfred, the family's longtime butler, announced. His voice was soft, carrying a note of paternal sadness. He had watched her grow up, watched her run away for a false love, and watched her return broken. "Send them in, Alfred," Celine said, turning away from the window with a firm, iron resolve. "And Alfred, have security do a final sweep of the gala guest list. I want to make sure Michael Vance and Tiffany Baines are still seated at table 19. Alfred raised a thin eyebrow. "Table 19, madam, is by the kitchen doors." "It seems rather drafty. It is perfect," Celine said, her eyes turning cold, a glint of absolute iron suggesting she knew exactly what she was doing. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, the city air felt electric. Tiffany Baines surged into Maison du Ciel like a storm, her 6-inch heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the floor. She was vibrating, purely on edge. Today was the day she claimed that silver Vautour gown. She had spent the night awake, obsessively picturing her entrance at the Sterling Gala, showing everyone who actually ruled the room. She envisioned the cameras flashing and the envious whispers, that sweet validation of having finally arrived. Michael trailed behind, looking paler than usual. He checked his banking app. The balance was dangerously low. His severance was gone, burned through on Tiffany's lease, the luxury car, and that ring. He was walking a razor-thin line. The whole future rested on this gala. If he landed a contract with Alexander Sterling, the money would not matter. But the numbers staring back at him were screaming. "I am here," Tiffany announced to the empty boutique. Throwing her arms wide, "Bring out the dress." Madame Clotilde, the manager, emerged from the back office like a stone-faced sentinel. She did not offer a smile. No champagne, no greeting. Clotilde stood with hands clasped, her expression chillingly blank. "Miss Baines," Clotilde said, her voice thick with ice. "Michael, we are in a hurry," Tiffany snapped, dropping her gold clutch on the counter. "Wrap the silver Vautour and the matching bag. Michael, get the card out and pay the woman already." Michael reached for his wallet, his hand shaking. "Right, the silver one. I am afraid that is impossible," Madame Clotilde said smoothly, her gaze locked on Tiffany. Tiffany froze, her fake lashes fluttered like trapped moths. "Excuse me, the Vautour gown is no longer available," Clotilde stated firmly. "A private collector acquired it. It is no longer for sale to the public." "Acquired," Tiffany's voice spiked, a sharp, jagged sound cutting through the quiet boutique. "I was here yesterday. I told that assistant I was buying that dress. You cannot just sell it to someone else. Do you even know who my fiancé is?" Clotilde did not flinch. Her gaze shifted to Michael with cold disdain. "I am well aware of who Mr. Vance is," she replied, voice perfectly flat. "The client who purchased the gown did not merely put down a deposit. They purchased the entire collection," Clotilde stated. Michael looked like he had seen a ghost, his skin turning a sickly white. He stuttered, his voice barely audible. "The entire collection. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars." Clotilde did not blink. "Indeed, the client requested total exclusivity. No pieces from this platinum line will be sold until after the Sterling Gala." Tiffany's face began to flush, a mottled red that clashed with her heavy makeup. A vein throbbed in her forehead. "This is pure discrimination," she hissed, voice trembling. "Who bought it? Is it some washed-up actress?" Clotilde remained unmoved. "I am not at liberty to disclose the identity," she said, gesturing toward the security guard. "However, she did leave a specific message for you. Miss Baines." "A message," Tiffany spat the words out. Clotilde picked up an elegant cream-colored card. She read the contents aloud, her voice cool and devoid of emotion. "Tell Miss Baines that true class cannot be bought off a rack. It is inherited or earned. She has done neither." Tiffany let out a primal scream that echoed off the walls, shattering the boutique's peace. In a blind rage, she swept her arm across the counter, sending expensive display perfumes crashing down. Bottles shattered, the cloying scent of jasmine and amber flooding the air. "Tiffany," Michael barked, grabbing her arm in a panic. "Stop this, you are making a scene." "I do not care," Tiffany shrieked. Yanking away, "They humiliated me. I know someone is laughing at me right now. Michael, fix this store. Do something." Clotilde's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Miss Baines, you have 5 seconds to leave before I have you arrested. Believe me, with our owner, the resulting lawsuit will bury you." Michael did not wait. He dragged a sobbing, cursing Tiffany out of the store and shoved her onto the scorching pavement. A sickening pit formed in Michael's stomach. He looked down at the woman he had destroyed his marriage, for her mascara was running in black streaks, and she was screaming at a startled doorman. For the first time, he wondered if Celine was doing all right. Celine, who never raised her voice. Celine, who always made him tea. He shook the thought away. Celine is in the past. Tiffany is the future, he told himself. "We just need to survive this gala." "It is okay, baby," Michael said, trying to soothe her, though his heart was not in it. We will find a better dress. When we meet Alexander Sterling, none of this will matter. They had no idea that Alexander Sterling was currently sitting in his library, laughing softly as Celine recounted the story of the dress. "You are absolutely vicious, my dear," Alexander said, sipping his scotch. "I learned from the best, Dad," Celine replied, staring at the fireplace. But the dress was just the appetizer. The real main course happens tomorrow night. The Sterling Charity Gala was no ordinary party. It was an institution held in the grand ballroom of the legendary Sterling Imperial Hotel. It was the night when titans of industry gathered to toast one another. The ballroom was a masterpiece of gilded design. 10,000 white orchids hung from the ceiling, woven through massive crystal chandeliers that dripped light like diamonds. The floor was polished marble, and the air smelled of perfume, beeswax, and pure raw power. At 7:45 p.m., guests arrived in a steady stream. Rolls-Royces and Maybachs lined up outside the velvet ropes. Paparazzi flashes popped like relentless strobe lights. Michael and Tiffany arrived in a stretch limousine. Michael had paid for the door service, desperate to project wealth. But the limo was an older model with yellowed headlights, and the driver looked bored. Tiffany stepped out, without the Vautour gown. She wore a bright crimson dress grabbed from a department store. It was too loud. It had heavy sequins that caught the light aggressively and a slit to the hip. In a cheap nightclub, she might have looked like a queen, but here among silk and chiffon, she looked like a neon sign in a museum. "Smile, Michael," Tiffany hissed, waving at photographers who were aiming at a senator behind them. "We need to be seen." Michael adjusted his tie, which felt far too tight. "I am smiling. Just keep your voice down. These people value discretion. Discretion is just for poor people with secrets." Tiffany scoffed, completely unimpressed. She dragged him toward the red carpet. They entered the ballroom, and the sheer scale of the wealth hit Michael like a physical blow. He saw a tech CEO chatting with a duchess. He saw his old boss, the man who refused him a promotion, begging for a moment of time with a venture capitalist. "Let us find our table," Michael said, eyes darting across the opulent room. "I requested a spot right by the Sterling family." He flagged down a steward holding a leather-bound chart. "Vance, table for 2. The steward ran a gloved finger down the list. Face neutral. He paused, then looked up with a polite, tight-lipped smile. "Ah, yes, Mr. Vance. You are at table 19. Vance, you are at table 19, the steward said, his voice soft and polite. 19, a prime number. Tiffany sounded smug, her voice full of misplaced satisfaction. "Must be in the front row, right next to the high rollers." The steward gestured vaguely toward the dim back of the room. "It is located near the service entrance. Sir, through those pillars." Michael felt his face heat up. They walked past all the prime tables. Table 1, Table 2, where the billionaires actually sat. They walked past rows of corporate tables, each one more luxurious than the last. They kept walking until they reached the edge of the room, right by the swinging double doors where waiters rushed in and out with heavy trays of fish. Table 19 was small, wobbly, and hidden behind a large, drooping fern. "This is a joke," Tiffany spat, kicking the rickety chair leg. Her face twisted with pure rage as she glared at the empty space. "We are sitting with the help. Michael, tell them there is a massive mistake. Tell them you are a VIP or a renowned architect. I cannot make a scene here." "Tiffany," Michael hissed, grabbing her wrist to silence her. "Look around you. That is the governor right over there. If we scream, we are done. Just sit down. Be quiet. We will mingle later. We need to find Alexander Sterling." They sat in a heavy, sullen silence, watching the elite from the shadows. Tiffany downed a glass of warm champagne and aggressively signaled a waiter for another. Michael scanned the room, desperate to make eye contact with anyone who held real power. Suddenly, the brilliant lights in the ballroom dimmed. The murmur of conversation died down instantly. A profound hush fell over the room. Heavy with anticipation, the orchestra, which had been playing soft jazz, swelled into a dramatic, sweeping crescendo. A sharp, bright spotlight hit the grand staircase. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding the entire space. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed across the hall. Please welcome your host for the evening, the chairman of Sterling Global, Mr. Alexander Sterling. Polite, respectful applause rippled through the room, a wave of sound that signaled the start of the true event. Alexander appeared at the top of the stairs, regal and untouchable in a tailored tuxedo. He waved, descending a few steps as the master of ceremonies continued, his voice rising with excitement, making her return to public life after 5 years abroad, the sole heir to the Sterling Empire. His daughter, Michael frowned, deeply confused by the announcement. Daughter, I did not even know he had a daughter, he muttered to himself. I thought he was completely estranged from his family. Michael whispered, who even cares? Tiffany rolled her eyes, bored with the presentation. Probably just some spoiled brat coming home to spend her father's money. Then she stepped out into the light. The breath left Michael's body. The woman at the top of the stairs was a total, breathtaking vision. She was wearing the silver couture gown, the very dress Tiffany had screamed for yesterday. On this woman, it was perfect. It looked like liquid starlight draped over a statue. Her hair, dark and glossy, cascaded down her back in elegant waves. She wore a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that glittered so intensely it was hard to look directly at it. She held her head high, radiating a cold, sharp power that made the air in the room feel thinner. She moved with a grace that seemed to command the very architecture of the building around her. She looked like a queen surveying her subjects, utterly unbothered by the hundreds of stares fixed upon her. She began to descend the stairs, her hand resting lightly on her father's arm. Michael squinted, his brain struggling to process the impossible sight. The dramatic lighting cast shadows that hid the finer details of her face. There was something strangely familiar about her walk, the proud, confident tilt of her chin. That dress, Tiffany gasped. Clutching the tablecloth, that is my dress. She is the one who bought it. Tiffany hissed, her face draining of all color until she looked like a ghost. Quiet, Michael whispered, leaning in close, his pulse hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Tiffany, shut up. The woman below reached the final step. The spotlight widened, catching her features in a sharp, crystalline glow. She looked directly into the crowd, scanning the ballroom with icy precision. She offered no smile, no pleasantries. She looked fierce, guarded, and entirely in control. Michael felt the room tilt, his equilibrium vanishing. He gripped the edge of his table so hard his knuckles turned bone white. It was impossible. It could not be the woman he had left 3 days ago. The woman he had labeled mediocre. The woman he had tossed out of their suburban house because she dared to clip coupons for groceries. Celine, no, he thought, his mind desperately fighting to reject the terrifying reality unfolding before his eyes. Michael whispered the name, the word catching in his throat like a jagged piece of glass. No, 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 what is it? Tiffany snapped, her eyes narrowing with sharp suspicion. You know her. Michael turned to Tiffany, his face a mask of pure terror she could not even begin to grasp. Tiffany, that is Celine. Tiffany looked back at the grand staircase. She squinted, struggling to reconcile his claim with the power radiating from the stage. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Your ex, the frumpy one. Don't be stupid, Michael. That woman is dripping in millions. Your ex wears sweaters from a discount store. That is a Sterling, I am telling you, Michael said, his voice trembling with a frantic, uncontrollable vibration. That is my wife at that exact moment, as if she could feel the weight of their gaze from across the vast ballroom. Celine turned her head toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen service doors, toward the potted fern. She locked eyes with Michael, the distance between them vanishing. Even from 50 feet away, he felt the intensity of her look. It was not love, nor was it the sadness of a scorned woman. It was a look of absolute, chilling recognition. She slowly raised her champagne flute in a mocking salute. A toast, a challenge, a silent goodbye. Then she turned away, took her father's arm, and walked into the crowd of billionaires who parted for her like the Red Sea. Michael sank back into his chair, the crushing weight of his mistake hitting him like a tidal wave. He had not just walked out on his wife. He had walked out on the princess of the very kingdom he was dying to enter, and he had brought the court jester along for the ride. The ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos and designer silk, a swirling galaxy of extreme wealth, where the laughter sounded like the clinking of gold coins, mocking his sudden insignificance. But at table 19, the air was stagnant, heavy with the stench of failure. Michael could not look away from Celine. She was currently circulating near the orchestra pit, surrounded by a phalanx of powerful admirers. He watched as the CEO of a major banking conglomerate, a man Michael had been trying to secure a meeting with for 3 grueling years, bent down to kiss her hand with genuine, palpable reverence. He heard Celine laugh, a sparkling, vibrant sound he had not heard in all their years together. It was not the quiet, polite chuckle she used when they watched movies on their worn-out sofa. It was the confident, booming laugh of a woman who owned the room. "Stop staring at her," Tiffany hissed, stabbing her fork into a piece of dry, overcooked chicken. "It is a trick." "It has to be. It is not a trick, Tiffany," Michael murmured, wiping beads of cold sweat from his upper lip with a shaking hand. His mind raced, rewriting the history of his entire marriage in a blur of agonizing clarity. He remembered when he complained about rising mortgage rates, and the next day the bank called to report a clerical error, lowering them to nearly zero. He remembered how he always secured reservations at sold-out restaurants the moment Celine made the call. He remembered the junk car she drove, a beaten-up Honda. He realized now it was not because she could not afford better. It was because she simply did not care for status symbols. "She is playing a role," Tiffany insisted, her voice rising in a cocktail-fueled panic. She was getting sloppy and loud. "She is probably a hired actress. Or maybe she is sleeping with the old man. That is it. She is Alexander Sterling's secret sugar baby." "Disgusting," Tiffany muttered, her eyes hard. "Tiffany, keep your voice down," Michael begged, his head darting around nervously. "You do not understand. If that is really Celine Sterling, my career is finished. I am here to close a massive contract with her father tonight." If she tells him what?" Tiffany snapped, her temper flaring. "That you finally traded up. That you left a boring housewife for a woman with style. Any man would understand that," Tiffany said, her ego desperate for validation. She stood up, smoothing her sequined red dress. "I am going to the bathroom, and on the way back, I am going to walk right past her. I want to see the panic in her eyes when she realizes we are not intimidated by her act." "Tiffany, don't." She moved on, her hips swaying with sharp, aggressive confidence, a crimson blade cutting through the elite crowd. Michael sat alone at his wobbly table. He felt small, insignificant, completely exposed under the room's glare. He checked the portfolio case beneath his chair. His designs had seemed brilliant this morning. Now they looked like pathetic doodles made by a child with cheap wax crayons. Across the ballroom, Celine noticed the flash of red sequins approaching. She did not flinch. She was busy with Mr. Henderson, the city zoning board head, and the proposal for the waterfront park. Celine asked softly, approved. "Miss Sterling," Henderson beamed. "Anything for the community." "Excellent." Celine's eyes shifted. She saw Tiffany weaving toward them, clearly looking to cause a scene. Tiffany wasn't heading for the restroom. She was making a beeline for Celine. The crowd naturally drifted away, sensing the friction and the looming social disaster. Tiffany stopped 3 feet out. Up close, the contrast was brutal. Tiffany's makeup was caked on, cracking under the harsh light. Celine's skin looked like flawless, cool porcelain. Tiffany's dress looked like a cheap, tacky costume from a bargain bin. Celine's gown was high art, timeless and regal. "So," Tiffany said, her voice loud enough to silence nearby tables instantly, "you clean up nice. Who paid for the rental?" The circle of elites fell silent, shocked by the crude breach of etiquette. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, visibly uncomfortable. Celine turned to face her. She didn't look angry, she just looked bored. "Hello, Tiffany," Celine said coolly. "I see you found the buffet. I hope the chicken at the back was to your liking." Tiffany flushed a deep, ugly red. "Don't talk down to me. You think borrowed diamonds make you better than me. We all know who you are. You're Michael's charity case ex-wife." She looked around, desperate for validation. "She used to clip coupons. She counts pennies," Tiffany sneered. "This is all a sham." The crowd didn't laugh. They stared at Tiffany with pity, disgust, and aristocratic disdain. In this world, talking about money so crudely was the ultimate sin. "Tiffany," Celine said, stepping forward with elegant, quiet menace. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "You are embarrassing yourself. And, more importantly, you are embarrassing Michael. If you want to help his career, turn around, walk back to table 19, and sit in silence until your car arrives. You cannot tell me what to do." Tiffany shrieked, her face turning a deep, throbbing crimson. "I am the future, Mrs. Vance." She spat. "The future Mrs. Vance," Celine repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. "Yes, you are welcome to the title. I certainly don't need it anymore." Celine gestured toward a security guard in the shadows. He stepped forward, stern and professional. "Is there a problem, Miss Sterling?" the guard asked, scanning the room. "No problem at all, James," Celine said with a warm, dismissive smile. This guest was just looking for the exit. She was looking for the exit. "Keep a close eye on her. We wouldn't want her to trip on her way out." Tiffany opened her mouth to scream, but the wall of social pressure slammed into her like a physical force. Dozens of powerful people were staring, looking at her like a cockroach on a wedding cake. She turned and stomped away, tears of rage burning her eyes. She rushed back to Michael, who was hiding behind his champagne glass. "We are leaving right now," Tiffany hissed, grabbing her purse. "We can't," Michael whispered, his face turning paper white as he stared toward the stage. "Look," he pointed. Alexander Sterling had returned to the microphone. "I would like to invite the lead architect of the partner firm to the stage," Alexander announced. "Mr. Michael Vance, are you here tonight?" Michael froze. His heart felt like it had stopped. "He wants me," Michael stammered. His eyes wide, hope, irrational and blinding, surged through him. "Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he just likes my work." Celine kept it professional. "She didn't tell him a thing." "Go." Tiffany pushed him hard. "Show her who is boss." Michael stood up slowly. His hands shook as he fumbled with his tuxedo jacket. The ballroom felt cavernous. As he stepped into the center, the crowd parted like a silent, frozen sea. He tried to ground himself, telling himself this was just business. A man like Sterling only cared about profit, not his daughter's messy past. But as he reached the stage, his legs felt like lead weights. Alexander Sterling watched from above, his silhouette cold against the stage lights. The older man showed no hint of a smile. His gaze was dark, deep and unnervingly judgmental, stripping away Michael S. layers to see the truth. Michael climbed the stairs to the podium, the microphone humming through his entire nervous system. He scanned the ballroom, exposed in the harsh light. At the back, Tiffany stood on her chair, cheering silently. Then, his eyes locked on the front row. Celine sat there, her silver gown shimmering, staring with an unblinking gaze that made his stomach turn. Then, she smiled. It was a sharp, predatory expression that chilled him to the marrow. "Mr. Vance," Alexander Sterling announced, his voice booming through the hall. "Thank you for making time to join us tonight." "It is an honor, sir," Michael replied, his voice cracking, revealing his anxiety. "I have my portfolio right here for your review." Alexander cut him off, his tone cold and final. "We didn't bring you here to discuss sketches," Michael Alexander said, his voice echoing. "We are here to address your substantial list of liabilities." The ballroom went deathly quiet. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Michael stood under the spotlight, the heat burning his neck. "Liabilities," he stammered. "I don't understand. My firm is solvent. We have projections that show immense growth," he insisted. Then Alexander Sterling stepped aside, and Michael S. heart stopped. Celine rose, gliding toward the stairs. She didn't go to her father. She walked straight to the podium, taking the microphone. "The Sterling conglomerate values integrity," Celine began, her voice calm and clear, ringing through every corner of the room. "We build foundations that are meant to last," she continued, "not ones built on sand. And Michael, your foundation is entirely artificial." "Celine, please," Michael whispered, desperate to keep this private. "Don't do this now." She ignored him completely. She pulled a remote from the stand, and a massive screen descended, hanging over them like a judgment. "Mr. Vance came here believing he was self-made, Celine told the crowd, her eyes devoid of warmth. He thinks his lifestyle, his car, and his mistress are earned through his work. With a click, the screen flared to life. It displayed a detailed bank statement under the name Vance Household. For 5 years, she narrated, I transferred money into this account, disguised as freelance consulting fees. That money came from my private trust, she revealed. It paid for our mortgage. Michael, you thought you were paying the bills. No, you were simply moving money into a savings account I created. An account you emptied 3 days ago to buy that yellow diamond ring. A sharp gasp rippled through the room. Michael felt his knees give out. He had drained that money, fully believing it was his own hard-earned equity. Click. The screen shifted to show a luxury dealership invoice. The BMW lease, Celine continued. You never qualified for that loan. Michael, your debt-to-income ratio was too high. The dealership contacted me, and I co-signed the lease through a shell company. I am the sole reason you drive that car, she said. Celine turned to look at table 19, where Tiffany was standing, frozen in horror, the credit card. Click. A massive image of a black card appeared on the screen. It was the same one Michael gave Tiffany, the one she had waved in Celine's face earlier. This is a supplementary card issued only to the spouse of a sterling account holder, Celine explained. Michael, you never bothered to ask why you had a $50,000 monthly limit despite your earnings. I paid that balance every single month. Celine turned back to Michael, her eyes reflecting nothing but cold, hard truth. You did not buy that ring for your mistress. Michael, I did. You did not take her to dinner. I did. Everything you enjoyed for 5 years was authorized by me. I loved you, she said, leaning into the mic, her whisper vibrating through the room. But you never wanted a queen. Michael, you wanted a worshiper. When you brought her, she pointed to Tiffany into my family boutique to shop with my money. You made a mistake. Michael stood shaking, exposed. The crowd looked at him with nothing but pure disgust. They saw him for what he was, a fraud, a parasite now, Celine said, her tone suddenly bright and artificial. Regarding your contract, she glanced at her father, who nodded. Sterling Global is acquiring your firm as of this morning. We bought out your partners. They were happy to sell once they knew the risk you represent. Michael gripped the podium for balance. You are my boss. No, Celine smiled thinly. I am not your boss, Michael. You are fired. Then she looked toward the back of the room. Tiffany Baines, the spotlight swung around, pinning Tiffany against the wall. She looked like a trapped animal, shielding her eyes from the glare. That ring, Celine declared, her voice sharp, since it was purchased with funds meant for a spouse, and you are clearly not the spouse. That is theft. Celine checked her watch. My lawyers froze those assets 10 minutes ago. Your card is dead. The valet has my instructions. I have revoked my guarantee. So, Celine concluded, looking at them both, Michael broken on stage and Tiffany trapped in the light, you are free to leave, but you will have to walk. And Tiffany, you might want to run. The ring is stolen property, and I believe the police are waiting in the lobby. Celine set the mic down. The hollow thud signaled the end of Michael Vance's life as he knew it. She turned to her father. Shall we dance, Dad? We shall. Alexander beamed as the orchestra began a waltz. Security guards moved in, leading a weeping Michael off the stage and away from the guests. At the back of the hall, Tiffany tugged at the diamond on her swollen finger as 2 officers closed in. Michael took one last look back. He saw Celine spinning gracefully in her father's arms, her silver dress flaring like a supernova. She did not look back. She looked entirely, completely free. He walked out into the cold night, his pockets empty and his future obliterated. The heavy oak doors of the hotel slammed shut with the finality of a prison cell. The laughter faded away, replaced by the harsh, indifferent noise of the city street. It was raining a freezing drizzle that soaked through Michael's tuxedo. Do something, Tiffany shrieked. Her voice raspy, mascara ran down her face in dark streaks. Call a car, call a lawyer. You said you were the architect of the future. Fix this right now. Michael stared at his phone. The screen was a spider web of cracks from when he dropped it. 0 notifications, no job offers, no support, just a bank alert showing his account was massively overdrawn. I cannot, Michael whispered, his voice hollow. She froze everything. Tiffany. The credit cards. The accounts. It is all gone. The ring. Tiffany frantically pulled at the yellow diamond. Her finger was swollen from the night. It is stuck. Help me get it off before they reach us. But it was far too late. Two police officers stepped forward, looking bored and ready to finish their shift. The officers had that specific, cynical look of men who had seen this drama play out 1,000 times. One stepped forward, his badge glinting under the streetlights, and fixed his gaze on the woman standing in the debris of her ego. "Miss Baines," he began, his voice devoid of warmth, "we are here regarding a report of grand larceny. The claimant, Celine Sterling, provided proof that the item was never authorized for your use. It was a priceless token of love." But Tiffany screamed like a banshee as she scrambled backward. Her movements frantic. "My fiancé gave it to me," she insisted, though her words carried no weight against the cold reality. The officer remained unmoved by her outburst. "A fiancé who used a corporate card he was never authorized to use," he corrected, his tone clinical. "You have two options, Tiffany. Hand it over or come down to the station. Your choice." Michael watched, paralyzed, as Tiffany, the woman who sneered at Celine for wearing department store rags, frantically used her own teeth to pry the ring off. She finally tore the ring from her finger and hurled it into the plastic evidence bag, letting out a sob of pure, materialistic grief. "You are pathetic." Tiffany spat, turning her venom toward Michael. "I am going to my mother's. Do not call me. If I ever see your face again, I will scream." She hailed a yellow cab, not a luxury car, not an Uber, but a peeling city taxi. Watching her retreat felt like witnessing the final act of a play gone horribly wrong, leaving Michael to realize the expensive veneer he had built was peeling away just as fast as that taxi pulled from the curb. The yellow car vanished into the dark, rainy night, leaving Michael alone on the curb. The valet looked at him expectantly, keys dangling. "Sir, the BMW." Michael opened his mouth to reclaim his status, but Celine's voice returned, guarantor revoked. "Keep it," Michael croaked. His spirit collapsing, he began to walk. He walked for 40 blocks, his expensive loafers shredding against the pavement, the freezing rain soaking his suit until he looked like a ghost, a hollow shell of the man who had walked out of his home hours before. He walked until he reached the small, damp apartment he had rented for Tiffany, the one he could no longer afford. When the next morning arrived, the sun brought no warmth. He arrived at his architecture firm at 9, heart-pounding, clinging to the delusional hope that Celine had been bluffing. Maybe he still had a job. Maybe he could salvage his reputation. The irony was not lost on him. He had spent so long projecting success that he had forgotten how to survive failure. He swiped his keycard, but the reader only blinked a sharp, unforgiving red. A security guard, a man Michael had never bothered to learn the name of, opened the door. He held a small, pathetic cardboard box. "Mr. Vance," the guard said, refusing to make eye contact, "these are your personal effects. You are not permitted on the premises." The finality of those words hit Michael harder than a physical blow, forcing him to stand there like a stranger in a building he had helped to define. "I need to speak to the partners," Michael demanded, his voice thin. "I built this firm. The firm is under new management," the guard replied flatly, handing him the box. It felt incredibly light, a mockery of the weight he once thought he carried. Inside, there was a framed photo of him and Tiffany, a cheap stapler, and a coffee mug that said "Boss." "Sterling Global is doing a full audit," he added, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "They suggested you get a lawyer," the guard mentioned, though he sounded skeptical. "Well, good luck finding one who will go against the Sterlings." Michael took the box and trudged away. He sat on a cold park bench across the street, watching the building he once entered with such unearned confidence. Weeks bled into months. The divorce was swift and brutal. Michael had no money for a high-powered attorney, so he was assigned a court-appointed representative who looked bored, distracted, and entirely uninterested in his fate. Celine did not even show her face at court. Instead, 5 lawyers in sharp gray suits arrived to dismantle Michael S. World with surgical precision. He walked away with nothing, No assets, no status, just a mountain of personal debt from trying to fake a billionaire lifestyle. Now he lives in a cramped, windowless basement in Queens, where the silence is his only neighbor. He applied to dozens of firms, but the sterling name remained a locked gate. He was radioactive 6 months later. Michael was humping heavy bags of cement behind a hardware store counter. His hands, once used for drafting designs, were raw and stained. Lunchtime arrived, his only real break in a day that felt like it would never end. He sat on a plastic milk crate, choking down a dry sandwich. A newspaper caught the wind and landed at his feet. Michael froze. There on the cover of Business and Life magazine was Celine. No ball gown this time. She wore a hard hat and a white blazer, standing in front of a gleaming skyscraper. The Project Vance architecture had botched. Sterling Global had finished. The headline called her the Queen of Acquisitions. The article described how Celine had reshaped the city skyline and built a life on her own terms. She looked radiant, utterly indifferent to the past. Beside her stood Julian Thorne, a landscape architect and her partner in every sense. The gap between her success and his ruin was sharp enough to draw blood. Michael stared at the photo, his chest tightening. He remembered her simple habits, the coupon clipping, the quiet nights when they had nothing. He had held a diamond and tossed it aside, mistaking it for glass, all to chase a piece of cheap glitter that vanished in the rain. He folded the paper, his movements slow. The manager shouted his name, demanding help in the plumbing aisle. Michael stood up, dusted off his apron, and returned to the mediocrity he had once feared. He finally understood this was exactly what he had earned. They had chased a mirage of wealth and ran straight off a cliff. Michael spent 5 years hunting for a flashier life, never realizing the woman cutting coupons in his kitchen could have bought and sold his entire fake world 10 times over. He wanted gold. He forgot that gold is cold, heavy, and lifeless. Celine showed that true class is not about what you spend. It is about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone discount it. What do you think? Did she take her revenge too far? Or was it exactly what they deserved? I want to know your take in the comments. I read every single one of your comments. If this story of karma hit home, hit that like button. It helps the channel grow. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another tale of justice. We will see you in the next one.